I just remember not expressing anger towards her individually, but towards kind of the entire field. But I was like, how did we miss this? How did we miss this not just in me, but in an entire generation of women?
Yeah. This is ADHD Aha, a podcast where people share the moment when it finally clicked that they have ADHD. My name is Laura Key. I head up our editorial team here at understood.org. And as someone who's had my own ADHD aha moment, I'll be your host. I am here today in person with documentarian and science journalist Danielle Elliot. Danielle, your work has been featured on HBO, NBC, the New York Times, ESPN. I know there's a long list. I don't have my computer in front of me, so I can't go on and on and on, but so excited to have you here today. Danielle is also the host and the journalist behind Understood's brand new podcast called Climbing the Walls. We're very excited. We're going to talk about that. Welcome, Danielle. Thanks for being in person with me today.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Can I offer you a fidget?
I'm like already looking at them like, can I grab one? Yeah.
It's like a tray of hors d'oeuvres that we
so
have
nice.
here on our fancy new ADHD Aha set. All right, Danielle. So on Climbing the Walls, you talk a little bit about yourself. Today on ADHD Aha, we're going to talk about you. How does that make you feel?
Great. Yeah. No.
I'm not convinced.
The thing in my head right now is, how often I tend to overshare and how much I'm going to try not to do that.
That's all I do on the show. I overshare, so
Yeah.
you're in good company.
Yeah, I feel like Climbing the Walls is a giant overshare, so we'll just keep going.
Let's talk about your diagnosis.
Okay.
When were you diagnosed with ADHD?
It was the end of February of 2022.
So
Yeah.
a pandemic diagnosis.
Yeah.
What was happening? Why did you seek out an evaluation?
So I guess it was 4 or 5 months earlier, I had gone through a breakup, and it was the night of the breakup, I just had this really visceral reaction to a very normal conversation, and that surprised me. And I kept thinking about it for another, 2 months. I just felt like I had this very strong reaction, and I tried to figure out what it was, and I finally narrowed in on rejection. And then I started searching extreme reactions to rejection, and something popped up about rejection sensitivity and rejection sensitive dysphoria.
Mm-hmm.
And as I read it, I was like,
yeah.
oh, this is actually a thing. This is not just one really strong reaction. And in that article that I was reading, there was a line about rejection sensitivity often being a part of ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
I was sort of like, wait a minute, is this like, do I have ADHD? And then I started looking more into ADHD. I talked to my therapist, and it just went from there.
Yeah. And now here you are.
Here I am.
Yeah. Tell me about the relationship and what was going on.
I would say for the last few months of the relationship, I think we were both, I think the nicest way to say it is like navigating our way out of it.
Nice. I've been there.
Yeah. That's probably the best way to put it. It was a conversation that I think we both knew was coming. I had been away on a work trip for a week, and during that week, I had been looking at other apartments. I pointed out the apartment to him that I was like, I'm thinking about moving in there. And in my head, it was like, we don't have to break up, but I could move into my own apartment, which is, and I know this now, as we drove by it, his thought was like, oh, okay, good. I don't have to feel bad about the thing I'm about to say to her tonight. So then it was just like, when we got home, I remember being completely exhausted, and I've often wondered if this played into my reaction. But it was as we were starting to fall asleep that he initiated a conversation that was like, I've been thinking this week, and I feel like I'm holding you back. He said it very nicely, but I just had this reaction that was like, it felt out of character. Like, I kind of don't remember the specific details of everything that was said. My reaction was very much like, okay, this was it. Like, this is it. We're not going back from here. Mm-hmm. And I was taking frames off the walls. Like, all of my stuff was packed.
That same night?
By like 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And there wasn't like screaming, but it was just like the feeling in my body was even like I feel like I was the meanest I've ever been. He tells me that I'm like, we're friends now.
Okay.
We've talked about it since.
Okay.
He's like, I think you're a little hard on yourself about how it went. But it was just such a visceral reaction. And the thing I finally came down to was like, yeah, it was a thing I had also been thinking about doing, but didn't. And it felt like such a strong rejection in the moment. I think I like got straight out of bed and got in the chair across the room, that kind of thing. And then was like a kid curled up in a ball in a weird way too.
Breakups are really hard.
Well, the breakup was for the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
Literally,
no, I
like
hear
that
you.
part wasn't. That's why I couldn't understand why I was still feeling so weird about it. I was feeling weird about how I acted.
You telling that story, I hear you that it was a big deal, and this visceral reaction has led you down this path of exploration. I've been in some breakups. That doesn't sound that bad to me.
I think in hindsight, was able to see how successfully I've avoided rejection my entire life. I was kind of sort of like, oh, this is the thing I've been avoiding. And this really does, this is not fun.
Okay. Yeah. So not an unusually flared up dramatic breakup scenario, but for you in the context of your life.
I mean, I can tell you that like 3 or 4, I don't know when I saw him again, because I went straight, I remember my passport was being renewed and it came back 3 days later, and 2 days after that I was in Mexico City.
Okay.
And I stayed for a month, and
On
then
the
I went
go.
to Belize. I was like, I'm out of here. I remember him telling me that I should get my anger checked. So I think I was mean that night.
Okay.
I don't know if that was more his reaction, because he now is like, no, I don't think you were actually that bad that night. So in the moment it felt bad.
I mean, he was probably feeling
I'm sure he was feeling sensitive.
As well.
Yeah. And I don't think we'd gotten in a single fight our entire relationship. So I think, and that was probably more so me bottling some things up and like masking throughout the relationship, but it definitely caught him off guard. Yeah.
So you probably, you tell me, you felt like you went from 0 to 100.
Yes.
But in reality, maybe it was 99 to 100 and you had been kind of holding it in.
I mean, there were other moments in our relationship, and I know now that this is a very ADHD thing, but I regulated by completely shutting down.
Yeah.
And in this moment, I didn't shut down. I just let it all out, because it no longer, I think it had felt to me a few times like if I said what I really thought, the relationship would end. And in this moment, it was already over. So I could say whatever I wanted because I was no longer risking anything.
Yeah. I mean, I've kind of been a little bit cheeky in my responses to you, but I hear you, like that. It's really painful. Just some of the situations that I've been in have been, I look back and I do one of these like, I don't even want to think about it because I'm so ashamed of the way that it's mortifying. I'm like, I was so childish. I was so petulant. What was I doing with my body? Why did I raise my voice like that? Why did I flail? Like, almost like going from the rejection to what some people call raging in a way, which is an unfortunate term, but it packs a lot of punch as a word, right?
And in an interesting way, I think the relationship itself helped me recognize my ADHD. Once I knew how ADHD shows up in relationships, then I started looking back, because it's like, I think you can think that you've started to regulate your emotions and you've grown up and you're in your mid-30s, and then I just started to realize that there were a lot of situations I had never been in because I hadn't been in a relationship. I hadn't been living with a partner. And seeing how I acted in those, it's like, oh, I'm not as mature as I thought I was. But
or just like didn't have the experience,
right? And I didn't know how to,
Well, didn't have the experience with those situations because you'd been bouncing around.
And I'd been avoiding those situations my whole life.
Bouncing around in, sounds like you travel a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know from the show that you've talked about, that was that was the first serious relationship you'd had, or?
Yeah. I joke that it was the longest relationship I've had, but I've been in longer breakups. I've been in like situationships that lasted a lot longer.
Situationships. Yeah.
That's probably the best thing to call them.
So tell me about like the feeling that you get when you are on the go, right? Talk to me about this need to travel. It's something that you've mentioned a few times on Climbing the Walls.
Yeah.
Tell me what that feels like, and does it work out the way that you hope it will work out?
I think it always did work out a certain way, and then it shifted actually shortly after finding out I had ADHD. I remember I got the diagnosis, and then I was sort of aware that I should be finding an apartment, but a friend of mine was going to Peru for a month, and I was like, oh, great. Apartments in Peru are $600 a month, and the flight's $200. My rent here would be $3,000 a month. I did the math and was like, of course I'm going to Peru for a month. I don't have an apartment yet. I'll just do this first. I remember specifically not telling my therapist I was going because she would have a reaction. Because I had just gotten back from this like Mexico and Belize, and then I like stayed home long enough to get diagnosed, and then immediately went to Peru. And I think I had to go to Aspen for work for a week, so I went straight from Aspen to Peru. And when I did get there, I was on a telehealth appointment with my therapist, and she just was like, It's the first time I saw her seem completely just like exasperated with me. And she was just like, Danielle, what are you running from? I was like, how dare you? I don't think. And I thought about it and I was like, I mean, my immediate reaction was, I don't think I'm running from anything. And then I thought about it a little more and I was like, I feel like I'm running towards something. And like the thing that I think with traveling that I always feel like I'm running towards is stimulation. I guess if I was going to put it in ADHD terms, it's like when you get to a new place, I never look things up before I go. I leave my phone and I just walk outside and then just figure out a day. And I think we don't get that anymore at home. Like everything's so planned, or it's just like, I don't know, I guess you could call it the sense of discovery. Like it just doesn't exist for me at home in the same way anymore. So I think that's what I get out of traveling is just like completely new surroundings, no idea what I'm doing, and being forced to figure it all out.
The novelty.
The novelty. Yeah.
Do you think you would have discovered that you had ADHD sooner had you not been able to travel for your career or in your life?
I don't know if I would have discovered it sooner because even like 2013, I was in grad school and my advisor always joked like that I had shiny ball syndrome. And I remember one of my professors saying that I was always doing two things at once, even in class. But that she'd started to notice that I seemed to focus better if I was doing two things. So she stopped asking me to stop. Like even if I was just like looking at things on an iPad or whatnot. I think people have actually been telling me I have ADHD my whole life without even knowing that's what they were telling me.
Oh, interesting.
I think that's where I'm going with that statement.
Got it.
Like,
I'm just thinking about like if you can't scratch that itch of novelty through travel, would you have tried something else or would it have bubbled over and like it would have?
It's such a good question. Yeah, because I switched. It was like like traveling, but I've been in New York since 2008, and I switched apartments every single year. So I managed to just make my life about constant change in almost every possible way. Yeah.
I lived. Hold on, I dropped
for
my
better
fidget.
or worse. I
can't go on without my fidget. Do you want a different one, by the way?
I'm kind of liking this one.
Yeah, this is a good one, a squishy one.
Yeah, I really like this one. And I don't know that I thought it was a problem. I guess that's the other thing is like, I don't think I ever thought anything was wrong until it was like, oh my God, that's how I act in relationships. Like that's who I am. Or that's how I react to a breakup. I want to know if there's ways to be better at this. Like career-wise, I was happy with how things were going. There were definitely a lot of moments where I wished I was capable of working for one company and wanting to stay there, but I would hit, there was one time I had a full-time job for 2 years and I hit the 1 year mark and was like, really, it was like at like some sort of itch. And then at the second year I quit because I was like, I just can't do this. And I think I've been really lucky that things have lined up every time I do something like that. But things could have gone much worse.
Listeners of the show know that the very first episode, I shared my own ADHD story, and the impetus for my discovering I had ADHD was also a breakup.
Okay.
So, and a very, very dramatic breakup that left me kind of reeling and like, I got to figure out what's going on with me. And it was a slow path to discovery, and I'm like 1/8 of the way through it. But like, is it too personal if I ask you, have you been in a serious relationship since then?
No, I haven't. I've dated a few people since then, but I'm now, I think so much. Well, I think I had always had questions about how happy I would be in a relationship to begin with. I think I was 34 or 35 when that relationship started, and I was becoming extremely aware that like, I don't know, that like people thought it was weird that it was almost like you didn't get as much of a chance with people because they're like, you've never been in a relationship. I don't want to teach you how to be in a relationship. Like there's like a, so I think I was feeling rejection in that sense. And there is a part of me sometimes that thinks the relationship lasted as long as it did because I was like, no, I'm going to have this almost like, I don't know. It was like, no, I'm going to know what it's like to stick it out.
Yeah, I'm going to win at this relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, and I'm going to at least know what it's like to have been in one for 2 years.
Yeah.
And like see what that's like. But
in one of the episodes of Climbing the Walls, you share audio from, was your sister's wedding? And you were the maid of honor. You were the maid of honor, and there was like some self-deprecating humor about your relationship experience. I think you referred to yourself as erratic, or here, I actually wrote it down. See, I have a note card. Like refusing to grow up. But
and I think I was kind of internalizing what everyone around me was saying. Like I think everyone was always like, are you ever going to settle down? Are you ever going to pick one? Are you ever going to do this? And there was a part of me that was like, I don't even know if it's all me not picking. There's also like, I haven't met someone that makes sense to me. And
It's also not a requirement.
It's not a requirement. Exactly.
Talking with you is making me realize that there may be a lot more people with RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, but they're not experiencing it because they're anticipating it and they're just avoiding it.
I mean, for me, it's even like if I send a pitch, even if I get a response from an editor quickly, it usually takes me almost like 2 or 3 days to open it because I don't want it to be a rejection. And it's like, even if it's not, sometimes it's an acceptance, but they want to have a conversation. They're like, can you talk later today? And now I've wasted 3 days. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I didn't get back to you. But it's like my fear of once, like, I don't mind putting things out there, but I don't really want to know how anyone reacts to them.
Good for you, though. I mean, I was going to ask you about work, too. So rejection sensitivity as a journalist. Let's talk more about that.
I think that I'm so much more confident in work than I am in dating that the sensitivity doesn't get to me as much. Yeah. I think it's also easier to not take it personally. I don't think there's a journalist in the world who hasn't heard editors are swamped. Like if they don't read your pitch, it has nothing to do with you or your pitch. Yeah. And there was also a couple pieces where like you can keep going back to an editor without seeming desperate in the way that there's so many tropes about women being desperate that like in dating, you're not going to like keep trying again with the same person. Yeah. With an editor, you can try 1,000 times.
Yeah. Might be you got that dogged attitude.
And I'm like, you don't know me from Adam. Like, this is fine. It doesn't show up for me in pitching. It shows up for me in publishing. Like, I sort of just want to, like, hide under a rock for days after something comes out. Yeah. I don't want to know what anyone thinks of it. Like, I think anytime I write anything about anyone, I'm sure they're going to call me and, like, ream me out. None of them have.
It's never happened before?
It's never happened. Okay. But I'm just so sure. So that's probably how it shows up. But then it's already out in the world, so I can't do anything about it.
Well, now that Climbing the Walls is out, you're here. You didn't hide. Congratulations.
It's not out yet.
When this goes up, it will have gone out yet.
It will have gone out. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. All right, so tell ADHD Aha listeners, what is Climbing the Walls about?
Climbing the Walls is my attempt to understand the rise in diagnosis among women, primarily during the pandemic, but it's been ongoing since the pandemic. I guess you could say it's my attempt to go beyond the headlines and the quick summaries of why so many women are being diagnosed with ADHD now.
And the quick summary being?
Oh, we just didn't know how it affects women. And that's just, you know, episodes 1 and 2, we debunk that right away.
Right.
I think we've known for a long time. We just weren't necessarily willing to listen.
Yeah. When we started talking about this, I was like, oh, so this is going to be about the pandemic and the rise of TikTok. Right? That's all this is going to be about. And it goes so much deeper than that. It's really, really stunning work. And I'm so excited for everybody to listen to it. What made you want to do this?
I think a lot of, like, whenever I do something that's sort of this deeper dive, it's a question that I'm asking. I think one of the things I love about having this job is that I would just ask that question for another 10 years without actually digging into it. Yeah. Except that by having this as a job, there's a reason. It comes back to motivation, I guess.
Totally.
I remember in the first conversation with my therapist, I was rejecting the diagnosis at first because I was like, I don't want to have this. Everything I read is that women who have this struggle in relationships forever. And I don't want to struggle in relationships forever. Like, this is the thing I wanted to fix about myself, I guess. I just remember, saying to her, like, but almost like not expressing anger towards her individually, but towards kind of the entire field. But I was like, how did we miss this? Like, not just in me. I had been seeing her for 4 years. And when I said I had it, or when I asked her about it, she sat forward so fast and was like, yes, I do. But I can't say that to you. So take the self-assessment. Mm-hmm. And I was like, how did we miss this? Not just in me, but in an entire generation of women. Yeah. Like, this is not right.
As, you know, a member of the team here at Understood and as an editor and getting to listen as this has been created, it's just, I'm learning so much about myself as a woman with ADHD as I'm listening to these episodes. And I'm curious, what have you learned about yourself through the creation of this show?
There's an episode where I'm with a group of women who have ADHD for almost an entire week. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I realized how universal a lot of the things are that a lot of women with ADHD experience. Yeah. That ended up becoming episode 5. And in that episode, just the conversations that I had, the conversations that never made it into the show, it was like I was just hearing people express my inner thoughts for an entire week. Yeah. And it was really interesting to realize, like, we all grew up in different circumstances, but also the same in a way. Mm-hmm. Like hearing them describe their childhood experiences, it all just I think that's the biggest thing I've learned is that I'm like, this is maybe a strange thing to say, but that I'm not all that unique. Like, actually, like, so many of the things that I thought were slightly different about me are actually not once you start talking to other women with ADHD.
Yeah, I mean, your life surrounding the
Yeah.
scenario obviously is like really is extremely unique. But yeah, I understand. I mean, with ADHD Aha, we speak to, I think we're past our 100th episode now.
Wow.
And it's just, I'm like, isn't this going to get repetitive? Isn't this going to get boring? But no, there's so many different ways that ADHD impacts people's lives. But but there is that kind of, that universality.
Yeah, there's something relatable in the episodes that I've heard. Like, I can relate to all of the stories that I've heard on the podcast too. You know, universality is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to so many experts and obviously to women with ADHD throughout the course of this. It's a 6-episode series.
Mm-hmm.
What conversation was particularly resonant to you? I know it's hard to choose amongst.
There's a woman in that episode, in episode 5. I would say all of the conversations in that one, but especially 2 conversations in that one. One was with a woman who was she was coming to this camp for her children. Mm-hmm. And 2 weeks before camp, she was diagnosed with ADHD herself, and it came completely out of nowhere. And that conversation it reminded me of, I think sometimes you can think you haven't really learned anything about your ADHD or it like progressed at all with managing your ADHD.
Yeah.
And speaking to someone who was right at the beginning of having been diagnosed reminded me of how much I have learned and how much I think I have started managing it better. Mm-hmm. And then there was a conversation with a woman who was in her 70s. And I think she puts perspective on the diagnosis and on the rise in diagnosis that it just really helped me see it in a you live in the moment you live in, and you only get to enjoy the amount of progress that has been made up to that moment.
It's really intimate, the show. It's so impressive to me the way that you tackle these really heady kind of scientific ideas, but then the humanity that's brought in with like that this is really a huge deal for the women it impacts. Was there any conversation with an expert or anything that you like a fact that you learned along the way that just kind of blew your mind that you had no idea before you started the work on this show?
When I read Sari's first book, it blew my mind. So a lot of what Sari and I talk about in episode 2, when I first sort of encountered the information, it blew my mind. Mm-hmm. And that's what led me to call Sari for the interview.
And she is, can you explain who she is?
Sari Solden is a woman who wrote a book in the mid-90s called Women with Attention Deficit Disorder. And she describes it just to a T, kind of like the feelings and the emotional experience of having ADHD, particularly for women.
Yeah. And in the 90s,
that was groundbreaking. Yeah. It was actually kind of rejected by a lot of the powers that be. Yeah. Well, so I think her findings were the most surprising to me. And then the final episode is all about research that's being conducted into female hormones and ADHD. Mm-hmm. And there's several surprises in that one. One, just realizing I assumed I didn't know much about hormones and ADHD because I hadn't looked into it. It was like 4 or 5 actual versions of that episode that we wrote then before we finally landed on one that was working. But trying to report on the absence of something is really difficult, and I don't think I've done that very much. And we did finally find some research that's being conducted, but I think that in a sense, that episode is about the absence of research, which is a tough story to tell. It's a story about something that doesn't exist.
I mean, just the ground that you cover in 6 episodes is so phenomenal, right? Because it's a show about the rise of ADHD diagnoses in women, right? And why that happened. But it's also a history of ADHD, right? Yeah. Which is really interesting in and of itself. You add this gendered layer on top of it. You have personal stories. And then it's really about, like, what's next? What do we actually need, right? If you could sum up, what do we need? What would you say?
Personally, I think we need treatments that consider female hormones and how those affect not only how they affect ADHD symptoms, but also how they affect ADHD medications.
Right.
And this is true, I think, not just in ADHD. It's true we're starting to realize it's true in many other things. We're seeing it with Alzheimer's. We're most likely going to start seeing it with dementia, but we need treatments that are actually individualized to each person.
I mean, what is it
I don't want to say that are gendered because I don't think that's the exact right way to say it. But women and men do not experience any illnesses, conditions, any mental health differences in the same way because they don't have the same bodies. There's a study coming out of the Risk Lab, Dr. Martell, that looks at young adult women. Mm-hmm. The one we talk about in episode 6 is about adolescent girls because that's the one that exists right now. But Dr. Martell's study is going to come out, hopefully. I have no idea what's happening with funding.
It's a great start. And we need 10,000
so
more of these because how many years of catch up are we doing?
Exactly.
Here, right? Yeah. So one of the things that I appreciate most about this show is that you tackle it from every angle, every possible angle that, say, an ADHD hater might have. Like, is it even real? Right? Is it actually different in men and women? Is it, is it being overdiagnosed? Is this like an evolution related thing? Like, so maybe it's not all ADHD haters, but like the really like the questions, the glossy questions.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're from haters and sometimes they're not.
Right.
Just done in such a balanced way. And I really appreciate that. What was the most interesting of all those questions to tackle or the most difficult?
I think overdiagnosis was really difficult to tackle, and like how situational ADHD can be. And I think it's that like ADHD is always there, but it does express itself differently in different, and I'm saying situational instead of environmental because I think environmental gets confusing, but like situation or environment that you're in. Yeah. I think that was the hardest one for me to tackle because I think a lot of things have changed in the world in the last 100 or 200 years, and I don't think our brains have fully adapted.
Yeah.
And I had a really hard time grappling with, is this something about the way the world is now? There's a book called, I believe the book's called Neurodivergent Mind.
Okay.
I just kept wanting to throw the book across the room because it's essentially like the conditions we live in compound symptoms in a way that is leading to, like, ADHD as a diagnosis is when it's impairing your life.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of this, like, I think a lot of people have lived with ADHD for a really long time, but it didn't impair their lives.
Right.
That was the biggest thing for me to grapple with was like, what is happening in the world that's causing a lot of this.
And it's a particularly hard one to grapple with because in this world that we live in, right, if you start talking about things as a trait that could be a favorable trait and then balance that with like, but this is there's deficits here, this is a disorder. It's like you don't want to go so rosy that people don't take it seriously. Right. Or that it's not something that needs to be reckoned with, because my take is that you spoon fed to me in the best possible way is that we need this research. We need to learn more about what's going on because it does impact people's lives, women's lives in unique and really difficult ways. Yeah. So it's hard to tackle that and to give credence to the there are positive things here, and
some of the advantages, disadvantages, conversation or deficits and
strengths.
Yeah, and strengths. Thank you. Conversation becomes such a black and white conversations, and things can coexist. Yeah. There can be situations in which it's advantageous and situations in which it's a deficit. Yeah. So I think that there's still a little bit of black and white thinking around that.
Yeah.
So that was a lot to grapple with too.
Well, you balance that nuance really nicely in the show. ADHD diagnoses in women, it's rising. Overall, this is a positive thing that there's more awareness about what's going on. And I'm just so grateful to what you've been doing. I mean, how long have you been working on the show?
I think that I first met with Neil Drummings, the editor on the show. And I think definitely shout out Neil. The show is only as good as it is because of him. I think we first met and talked about it maybe exactly a year ago.
Well, I'm so glad that that you two found each other and that you're here doing this show. I'm so proud of ADHD Aha and what we do on this show. It's much easier to make a conversation show than it is to do what you're doing. So I just want to express that to the people who are listening or watching right now, that this is different. Oh. This is a very deep, very thoughtful, not that ADHD Aha isn't thoughtful, but body of work.
Yeah, thank you.
That is a long time in the making because it needed to be a long time in the making because we had to get it right. And we wanted it to be high quality. So I'm so excited for everybody to hear it. It's out now. Everybody go check it out. Climbing the Walls Wait, do you want to talk about where the title of the show comes from before we sign off?
Yeah. The title of the show comes from an interview with a woman named Terry Matlin. She's been treating women with ADHD since the 90s. And during the pandemic, she received more emails than she's ever received with women seeking treatment. And she said these women were just climbing the walls. Like they needed help. And yeah, that's where the name of the show
I just got chills again. I remember when you all landed on the title, I was like, that's it. That's perfect. Danielle, thank you for trusting me with your story. It really is helpful for our listeners to hear about it and to get to know you better. They're going to get to know you on climbing the walls. And so now they have a little bit more information.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming in. Thanks for listening today. As always, if you want to share your own aha moment, email us at adhdaha@understood.org. I'd love to hear from you. And check out the show notes for this episode. We have more resources and links to anything we mentioned in the episode. This show is brought to you by understood.org. Understood is a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering people with learning and thinking differences like ADHD and dyslexia. If you want to help us continue this work, donate at understood.org/give. ADHD Aha is produced and edited by Jessamine Molly. Say hi, Jessamine.
Hi, everyone.
And Margie DeSantis.
Hey, hey.
Video was produced by Calvin Knee. Our theme music was written by Justin D. Wright, who also mixes the show. Samaya Adams is our supervising producer. Brianna Berry is our production director. Neil Drumming is our editorial director. From understood.org, our executive directors are Scott Koshier and Seth Melnick. And I'm your host, Laura Key.